Hi, this is Sandy from Lightning Tools, and I'm here with Brett. Well, not here, but excited to see you were there in the office.
Yeah, I'm in the office today. Yeah, absolutely. So this is the Lightning Tools
Again.
office. Absolutely. Yeah, and you're still in the same room in California.
Yes, yes,
Great.
it's true.
Excellent. So yeah, I'm not being blinded by the sunshine this week.
Uh,
That's
uh,
all good.
oh, in your conservatory
Yes.
or solarium, as we
Yeah,
learned.
I learned it was called a solarium, and actually we learned that from somebody who is
Oh,
going to be
right.
joining us on next week's show, right?
Yeah, we
So
did.
yeah, so last week we talked about the fact that we were going to try and get somebody on the Lightning Tools chat to talk about how they've implemented Lightning Forms. And
Mm.
one of our partners, Covenant, actually has a real life case study that they want to talk about, and this is how they've actually used Lightning Forms and also some other third-party tools as well to build a solution for a company called TKC Holdings. So they're going to come on the show and they're going to be talking
Yeah.
about what their problem was and
Mm.
how Lightning Forms has helped to resolve that problem. So I don't want
Yeah.
to talk too much about that at the moment. We can talk
Right.
about that on next week's show, but yeah,
Yeah, I'm
it's
excited to have our first guest.
yes. So we were talking about our conservatory in that show, or in the in the meeting regarding the show. So apparently you call it a solarium over
I've
there.
never had one, so I didn't know.
Yeah. Either way, you're either freezing or you're baking.
Right.
It's no in between.
Yes, true.
So.
Yep.
Cool.
Cool.
So, yeah, what we thought we would talk about was actually something else that came up
Mm.
this week, and this was in a demonstration, a sort of very high-level demonstration of a number of our different products. And a company was actually delighted to see that there is an alternative to InfoPath for them, and that was our Lightning Forms product.
Mm.
So they didn't know this going into the call.
Mm.
It was just something that we talked about, amongst some of their problems that they're facing inside of SharePoint, or challenges that they're facing and looking to overcome, and that was one of them. And
Well, so I'm curious, when they said that was one of their problems, are they, was that a problem because they know that it's being phased out, or are they having an actual problem with with InfoPath?
no, actually, so uh, this came about. They were looking to resolve a specific problem in SharePoint lists, and that was effectively they wanted the cascading lookup
Uh,
type feature. And they asked me if this is something that we could resolve, and I said, well, what I'm about to show you is going to be overkill to actually solve that one particular problem. But this is what we do have, and we went through a demonstration, and
mm.
um, I thought for a moment that I'd bored everybody because there was silence. But I think yeah, they're like, so this can replace InfoPath.
Ah,
So yeah, that sort of opened up the conversation into,
mm,
well, we have got all these InfoPath forms, and yet we know that it's being deprecated. What else can Lightning Forms do that would actually help resolve
mm,
or help become an InfoPath replacement? So
mm,
yeah, we sort of demonstrated on the basis of that, and it's actually quite interesting. Of course, if you're not familiar with InfoPath, you have the InfoPath client, which is where you would go through and design your form, and you could complete those forms as well using the InfoPath client. But one of the things you can also do is publish those forms to a SharePoint form library. And what happens then is basically the fields within inside that form get promoted as columns inside the form library, similar to that of sort of metadata or custom columns inside a document library, same sort of thing. So yeah, rather than just having this XML data set that is displayed inside the form,
mm,
the XML data is sort of also promoted out to columns inside that form library. And also similar to a document library where you have a application kind of associated with it, or a template associated with the document library, you would then have the form associated with the form library. So when you open up that XML file, it's actually presenting it within inside the form. That's kind of like acting as that template.
mhm.
So yeah, the way I always describe this, I don't know if you can cast your mind back at school days, but we used to have these exercise books, and
Mm.
they would have normally a pastel colored card on the front with a
Yep.
window cut out. And yeah, you would on the paper print the title of what is going to be inside this book, and that would show through that window because it was the first page. And that book is kind of like the XML, and
Oh,
the
okay.
card is like the form. So it's displaying the values through those fields by mapping in that way. So that's different to how Lightning Forms works. So Lightning Forms, in some ways it's similar, but there is no XML. You don't really start off designing the form layout. You start off designing a SharePoint list or multiple SharePoint lists as well. So when you're creating the list, you're creating things like, of course, you get the title column, but you've got all of the different field types for list columns. So start dates, end dates, email address, whatever it might be, and single line of text, multiple lines of text, etc. And so you design all the different fields that you want. And the way that then works to create a SharePoint list item is you create a new list item, and that's using the new form ASPX, which is actually rendering those fields for you.
And that's built into SharePoint.
That's built into SharePoint, yeah. So you just literally get a list of fields that you can complete, and you can save or cancel, and that's largely it. There is, of course, validation that you can add to those columns when you're creating them inside the list design, and also you can create some calculations and things like that as well. And more lately, you're able to also make a few changes, and I know we touched on this a few shows ago about maybe showing or hiding some of those different columns as well, but it's not a conditional hide, it's either they're hidden or they're not. And also you can change the order of those columns as well on the form. But other than that, it's basically a list of fields. And that's it. There's very little when you kind of try to compare that with an actual business form that people might want to fill out, where you're channeled into different directions based on what information you've already provided and that sort of thing. So yeah, with SharePoint lists, you design all the different columns that you want, and then using Lightning Forms, the way that comes in is you can then start to change the layout of that. So in the designer, you can create the different tabs and change the layout to be multiple columns, that sort of thing. I know we touched on that before. So but once you save that design, that becomes the replacement for the standard new form. But as far as features are concerned inside of InfoPath, yeah, a lot of them are the same. So you're limited to what you can do with calculation in a SharePoint list. You're not really limited if you use Lightning Forms, because you can do some calculations using things like the expression builder, and they're intuitive, but also you can add code if you want to as well. So if you wanted to use the client-side object model or REST or anything like that through the code inside the form, you can do that. And you can also add actions as well in a similar way to what you could do with InfoPath. So you can add some automation to it without involving things like Power Automate. You can actually string a list of actions together and build logic into the forms. And of course, the new feature that we've or one of the new features that we've released this week is also styling. And I actually put a training video together today, and it's actually a lot more useful than I thought it was going to be, because you do have certain fields that you want to distinguish compared to other fields. You want to highlight the importance of filling out some of these. And if you've just got a required field, there is only a little tiny asterisk. It's not that obvious. You've got 50 fields. So yeah, being able to change the border color or change the background color of those fields that you really need people to fill out, is useful in that sort of environment when they're completing them. So yeah, absolutely, it makes sense that this could be a replacement for InfoPath, and actually a lot of our clients do come from that background. Another useful feature that InfoPath offers is something called a repeating table, and yeah, these can be put into sections as well that you can expand and collapse and so on, and that's the sort of same thing that you can do inside of Lightning Forms too. So you can take a separate list and embed it on the form, so you're getting that repeating information inside a separate list, and it still opens up that item in the form as well. So what you can do is take the design for your new form, export it, and import that into the display form and the edit form. So yeah, business users, if they see that there's an expense claim or purchase order request or whatever it might be in a list, you've got all the full advantages of that list as far as grouping is concerned, and your custom views and so on. And there's the view formatting that you can now do, so you can really make the data that's collected really be useful data as well. So you're almost getting a report on the fly of all these completed forms.
Mm.
But when you open it, it's actually presented inside the form too.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's really the sort of challenge that is overcome with InfoPath. You
Right.
can redesign those in Lightning Forms or also other third-party vendors as well. That
Right.
it's not just
Mhm.
a Lightning Forms thing. And I know Microsoft.
I was just going to say that repeating tables is one of the things that I've seen people stumble upon or stumble over most when they're trying to go from InfoPath to Power Apps, for example, because
Yeah,
you can do that, but it takes some doing in Power Apps and some knowledge of how to get those other items and make sure they're related to the master, so to speak. Whereas with Lightning Forms, it's a matter of a couple seconds to just drop that onto your form.
yeah, and you're more of an expert than I am as far as Power Apps is concerned. It's something I've dabbled with. I know you've really sort of gotten in there
Mm.
and learned Power Apps inside out. But yeah, for me, who did actually have some InfoPath background and Visual Basic and C# sort of backgrounds where you're designing a lot of forms,
Mhm.
um, albeit that they have code behind them. With InfoPath, it did seem somewhat intuitive, and for me, I don't find Power Apps all that intuitive,
Right.
and I know there's other people that do. So it's
Mm.
I think it may depend on really what your
Mm.
background is and so on.
Mhm. But I would say an average business user usually does not find Power Apps super intuitive.
Yeah.
I try to break down that wall whenever I am talking with people, but when you come to things like trying to add a sub list, that's not going to be intuitive, and it takes whole videos to explain.
Yeah. So I'm an average business user. Okay, got it. Cool.
Right.
So yeah, I think that can be challenging, and it might work for you,
Mm.
it may not do. It also may depend on
Uh-huh.
what you're trying to do with your form as well,
Yeah.
as to
Yeah.
whether that's a good fit or
Mhm.
not.
Mhm.
So yeah, Lightning Forms is certainly an alternative, and
Mm.
there are some things that are going to be different. As this is the nature of software, and you pointed one of those out, is on the InfoPath forms, you could very easily print that or export it to a
Mm.
PDF or what have you, and that's a little bit more of a challenge since we're just viewing these forms inside the browser. It's not
Right.
a form. It's actually a display, and yeah, you certainly can print it, and we are going to publish, I think this month, a way that you can actually do that in our training videos and so on. But it's a bit more involved because you're basically using the sort of browser's print
Right.
options.
Right.
Yeah, it's getting the right part of the form from what's
Right.
displayed actually on the screen at that
Right.
time. So
Right. And yeah, so you don't get the advantage of, if you've used tabs, for example, then you're only going to see in your printout what was displayed at the time you hit print.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, there can be some different ways of working regarding that, but yeah, overall it's absolutely it's good
Mm.
InfoPath placement.
Mm.
So,
Mm.
and it's something that I think is coming up quickly. We're into 2021, and I think that it does feel like an old technology now when you look at InfoPath.
Well, the client is still 2013, right?
Yeah,
And that's 8 years ago.
it's right.
That's a long time in
Yeah,
computer
and
years.
it's not going to be moved on beyond that. So
Right.
so yeah, it is an old technology. It feels old when you're using it now, but yeah, come 2026, it won't be supported by Microsoft beyond that year. So and some of the customers that we're speaking to, they they don't just have a few forms.
Right.
They have hundreds or thousands of forms
Mm,
across, the organization that need to move to something by then.
mm, mhm,
So it's quite a big upheaval to do all of that.
mm,
So,
mhm. Yeah. I met with a customer this week that was also looking at forms, and they were showing me kind of a mock-up of a form they had, and it had some repeating elements to it. And so I was talking to them about adding the sublists and how easy that is to do, and so on. Um, And so I asked, what are they using currently? Because I was thinking, oh, that looks like maybe something they had in InfoPath, but they said, oh, you don't want to know.
right.
They said it was Excel spreadsheets and Word documents being emailed back and forth and things like that. So we see that a fair bit too, that people are just ready to have some kind of digital form that isn't emailing things back and forth.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Microsoft Forms, I receive a lot of forms that are in Word, and it drives me nuts.
Uh-huh.
So here's a list of underscores where you to type your name, and you start typing your name, and everything shifts
Right.
in the Word document. It's terrible,
Yeah.
horrible experience. But yeah, for that reason, I think some people are also looking at Microsoft Forms, which is something
Mm.
entirely different. It's not
Yes.
a business form per se, it's more of a survey type thing. But for that, for just collecting some information from external users and so on, I think is ideal.
Mm-hmm.
Go and
Mm-hmm.
build your forms in that. If
Right. And
all
you
you're
can
doing
do
is collect
branching
address,
and
yeah,
different field types and things, but yeah, you can't lay things out. You
correct.
get one question after the other.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a few different things that you can look at. Third-party
Mhm.
vendors like Lightning Forms, or there's Power Apps, or also things like Microsoft Forms as well.
Mhm.
Excellent. And we'll look forward to putting the show together next week as
Yep.
well. We have
Yep.
Kurt then, and find out a real case
Yep.
that has been a great implementation at TKC Holdings. I'm looking forward to
Yep.
that.
Me too. All right. Well, see you next week then.
Absolutely.
All
Take
right.
care.
You too. Bye.
Bye.